This is Peacemaker's May block of the month. It's called A Dandy, and it's located on Quilter's Cache. I'm going to have the PDF as well as the link to the YouTube video as part of the email. So it will also be on the website, so you can reference it there. A Dandy's block is very similar to Coxie's camp that we had for the month of April. I'd like to explain to you that there are 3 different colors, and I believe that I have them in the color code as they have them on Quilter's Cache. We've got color 1, which on Quilter's Cache is red, and color 2 is more of a star fabric, but again it's a small printed fabric, which is most important. Color 1 being a solid, color 2 being a small printed fabric, and then color 3 being a solid. On color 1, they instruct us that we need 1 strip of 2.5 by 20, which is here, and then 1 strip that is 4 7/8 by 9 3/4, which is here. But I actually cut 5 by 10, and I will trim it down as we make our diagonal later on in these instructions. I've learned to cut half square triangles a little bit larger so that I can square them up at the end the hard way. I definitely learned it the hard way. Color 2, which is our small print, we need 1 strip of 2.5 by 18. On color 3, we need 1 strip of 2.5 by 18, 1 strip of 4 7/8 by 9 3/4. Again, I cut this to 5 by 10. And color 3 also has 1 4.5 square, 4.5 inch square. So these are my pieces, and I'm going to show you now how the instructions tell you to cut them. Okay, first of all, before I start cutting them, I just want to explain that I'm not going to go out and buy fabric that matches the exact colors of the instructions. What I will do is use the same type of theme that they have, which is the dark solid color, the small print, and the light solid color. This way that I can keep with creating a quilt that I'm actually going to use. So we're going to start off with our 2.5 by 20 inch strip of color 1, and we're going to cut it into 8 2.5 inch squares. So let me push aside my color 3, my color 2, and I'll put my 5 by 10, leave that there, up here, and I have my strip. Now I'm actually going to be creating and cutting 2 blocks, so I have my fabric doubled up. So I hope that doesn't confuse you, but it will save me time. And I do apologize for getting this video in late. The end of the school year creates quite a busy schedule for myself. My 2 children keep me very busy. So I apologize for being late, and cutting both pieces at the same time for the 2 squares that I'm going to make would help me greatly. So I like being efficient, and that's what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to take this 2.5 by 20 inch square, and I'm going to cut 8 2.5 inch squares. So I will take, I'm actually going to go pull my other ruler, so it's over here. Sorry, I'm going to get you a little headache because I'm going to make you dizzy for a minute. I'm going to take my block, and I'm going to cut 2.5. The width of the ruler is exactly 2.5, so that's going to make it a lot easier for me. I'm going to measure from here to here, making sure that it is 2.5, and it is. Square that up, and I'm going to make 8 2.5-inch blocks without moving this ruler at all while I'm cutting. One, two. So you get the idea. I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest of these to save time for the YouTube. We can't post too long of a video on YouTube, so I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest of these. Okay, as you can see, I now have my 4 2.5-inch squares. They measured out perfectly, which I'm very pleased with. The next part of the instructions says to take color 2 and take its 2.5-inch by 18 strip, 2.5 by 18-inch strip here, and to cut it into 4 2.5. I'm sorry, to cut it into 4 2.5 by 4.5-inch squares. So at this point, move this down a little bit, take it to 4.5. My ironing pad is in the way here, but I'm going to go ahead and make sure that this is perfect. So we've got 1/2, 4, 4.5. Move that over here. Do our next 4.5. Being ever so careful. I'm going to cut that last piece. Okay, now we have our 4 pieces of our color 2, and we're going to now grab our strip of color 3, and we're going to do the exact same thing that we did with color 2, is we are going to cut 4 pieces of 4.5 by 2.5. So go over here and get to my 4.5-inch. And cut. Four and a half. And cut. And continue on. This is just one more cut. I'm going to go ahead and keep the recording going on. There we go. Excellent. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our 4 7/8 by 9 3/4, and again mine is larger. It's 5 by 10, and we're going to take our color 3 right here. Now this, at this point, I will have to separate mine because we have to do them individually. It's right sides together. And again here, put our second block. It's 5 by 10 together. We're going to go ahead and remeasure this. Use my square ruler. Make sure that we have what I originally cut. And I'm sorry if this confuses anybody, but honestly, I wish that somebody would have told me this when I did half square triangles before I did a quilt that I just finished. Would have saved me a lot of time. So as you can see, we are right at 5 and 10 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and measure this at 5, and I'm going to move it just slightly so that the line is exactly at 5. Excuse me while I reach for my marker. Thank you. I'm going to double check my other side to make sure that it is at 5 inches. Excellent. It is. I'm going to go ahead and do that again. Make sure that it's 5 by 5. Marking that, moving it over just slightly to compensate for the marked line. Again, since we cut a little bit bigger, even if we don't make that exact, it's going to work out. I'm going to go ahead over here and measure this. Make sure it is square, and it is. We will then take and measure a diagonal line from corner and corner on our first section. And make sure this is squared up a little. It's just a little, the purple is just showing a little bit over. And then again, over here, go from this corner. If you can see that, there's our line from this corner to this corner. Making sure it's perfect. I'm going to go ahead and do that on our second piece. And do that again over on this side. There we go. Now, the instructions tell us to take our piece here, and we are going to do a 1/4 inch to the left and a 1/4 inch to the right. We're going to bring those right down, and that is called speed piecing. So now that we've got that, we're going to leave that by itself here. Okay, we are over at the sewing machine, and we're going to go ahead and take our half square triangles, our speed sewing 1/2 inch triangles, and we're going to sew a 1/4 inch from our line, our diagonal line. When we get on the inside, we're going to go ahead and do a pivot at this point and go up the other side. So let's start on the outer edge first. I'm using a 1/4 inch piecing foot, and I don't know if you can see that. I'm going to try to get a little closer. See if you can see that. I don't think you can. I'll go back up. It has a nice little guide on the side that helps me make sure that I'm sewing in a straight line, which is very nice. I'm going to go ahead and sew this through. Go ahead and sew on this side as well. I'm going to just put a little press on there very quickly, just to make sure that my fabric is nice and flat before I start doing the other side. I'm going to flip this around just so my guide on my foot is on the right side as I'm pushing the fabric through. get right to my pivot point. I'm on my line, my center line. I'm going to pivot that, and I'm going to sew up the other side. I'm going to go ahead and sew that. Laura always taught me to make sure that I set in my stitches, which I've done. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to go ahead and cut on that center piece. Let me adjust my camera for a minute. There we go. I'm going to cut on that center line. Laura also taught me to close my rotary cutter, but I have a habit of not doing that. I'm going to go ahead and cut on the diagonal line here. For this one, push that aside. I'm going to come over here and do this one. I did set in my stitch line. So I'm going to go ahead and open these up to the dark side. Put a nice little crease here right before it. And then bring it over here. And be careful not to stretch. I almost stretched that. These half square triangles are very, very sensitive. If you stretch them and distort it, and it's just going to be a mess. I learned that the hard way as well. So it's nice and flat. I'm going to go ahead and do it to the rest of these three, and I'll be right back with you. Okay, I've got my half square triangles. I'm just playing around with it. Playing around with like, oh, such a pretty pinwheel, purple and white. Anyway, it's not going to be a pinwheel. So I've got my half square triangles. I'm going to go ahead and square them up and make sure that they are 4.5 by 4.5. See how that is? I mean, I don't know if you can see that very well. On this, but here is my 4.5 inch line right there. Always standing up always helps it to be so much better, but and of course it's going to be just absolutely perfect. So that's as perfect as I can make it. There we go. Alright, so I got to get my center line along my crease where the two colors are. Make sure I've got fabric in all sections. And I'll tell you, this is why you have to make it bigger, because I am slightly off, but at least I've got enough fabric to square up a 4.5 inch square. Now flip that. Come over here to 4.5 inches. Square that. Perfect. Perfect, perfect. Oh, so much easier when you make it a little bit bigger. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and finish that on my other three that I have over here, and get right back with you. So our half square triangles came out just beautiful. They're over here. Very just beautiful. They came out. Let me move my camera a little bit so you can see them. Anyway, they came out really, really nice, as you can see. However, our next set of instructions are taking our 4 pieces here of our color 2, and taking our 4 pieces, and what the instructions say now is to take our 2.5-inch squares, and we're going to lay them right sides together here, and we're going to sew hold on for just a sec. And we are going to sew on the diagonal here. And once we sew on the diagonal here, we're going to cut it 1/4 inch from our diagonal sew line, and this is going to flip up and it's going to create this block here, and we're going to do the same thing over here. Now, I've never done this before. This is a new technique. To me, it seems like it's a waste of fabric, but I'm going to follow the instructions as it tells me to do. So I'm going to go ahead and sew on the diagonal. Now, normally, you know, I would just go over here and sew, but I'm going to go ahead and put a line here, and I would also use my invisible pen, but it's purple, so it's not really going to show up too well on here. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to use my yellow scrolled pen here. It's from Clover. I like it good enough, but I'm going to go ahead and mark that diagonal just so you don't make any mistakes. And you just really don't have to press very heavy on this at all. I think you can see that line. Maybe you cannot see that line. I'm not sure how close we can get with showing you that line, but that line's there. Excuse me. So I'm going to go ahead and take this over to the sewing machine right here, and I'm going to sew directly on that line. I go ahead and press in, set in my stitches, and I'm going to cut 1/4 inch from that line. Now, I have a 1/4 inch ruler around here somewhere. I'm not exactly sure where it is, so I will just use this ruler that I have from OmniGrid. I'm going to put it right here, and my 1/4 inch, mark that right on my sew line. Take my rotary cutter and cut it, and then I'm going to press to the dark side. And that is one side. It looks very nice, but again, I'm not sure, but I'm sure there's no other better technique, but does seem to be a little waste of fabric, but I'm sure we waste fabric in more ways than just that. So I'm going to go ahead and take my next 2.5 inch square and put it here in this corner, match it up. As best as possible. You ask yourself why these don't match up sometimes. I have no idea. It is like the proverbial sock in the dryer. Never, somehow something gets lost along the way. I'm going to go ahead and take my little ruler, and I am going to measure on the diagonal. And for some reason, I wonder if that's going to come out right. Well, I think it will. So there's my yellow line. I take that to the sewing machine. and sew directly on that line. I find that holding the fabric when you're sewing it firmly but not with a lot of pressure seems to work well for me. I'm going to go ahead and set in my seams. Take it over here, take my ruler, cut a 1/4 inch off. And that appears to be just perfect. Now we should have a 1/4 inch right up here. We do, from our point. So I'm going to go ahead and do another one. Excellent. I'm going to go ahead and finish these two and I'll get right back with you. Okay, now that we've got those 4 pieces all constructed, the next part is to take our solid fabric, and what we're going to do is we are going to sew them right sides together like this, so that when they're down along this lower edge here, so you've got your color 2 meeting up with your color 3, and it's going to look like this when we're finished. So I'm going to put those right sides together, match those up. Bring those over to our machine. Do a 1/4 inch. Sometimes my machine likes to give me a little bit of a fit, so I'm going to go ahead and take that bird's nest out of there. Bring it back over to my machine. Give it a press. Okay, sorry, I was looking at something. Open it up. I'm going to press it to the color 2 fabric. And this is how it's supposed to look. So I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of these. Okay, now that we have all of our pieces sewn together, we are going to assemble our block and then sew each row section together. So our first row consists of a block, sorry, like so, and then this just like that. So we have our color 3 in the corner and also in the top of the centerpiece. Then we have our 4.5 inch square will go in the center, of course, and we've got this piece here, goes like that. This piece here goes like that. And then we continue to sew and assemble our block. And that is the end result of our block. So what I'm going to go ahead and I am going to sew the first row together, so these right sides together, seam here. Use my little stylus to make sure that that seam gets tucked under correctly. Go ahead and press that in and press that onto the outer. No, we're going to press it into the center piece. It flows better that way. So there, we've got that. Now we're going to take this piece here and sew it right sides together here. Make sure you look at both the front and the back. Get those together and sew. Set that seam, bring it into the center. I just love steam. Okay, and that is our first row. I'm going to go ahead and assemble row 2 here and row 3 here, and I will get back with you. Okay, I've sewn my center row together, and I wanted to show you something because somebody else also helped me with this. So when I pressed my center row and I pressed it to the left and right. So in my center block, I pressed it to the left and right. And the reason why I did that was because on the top block, the top row, I'm sorry, on the top row, I pressed it inward into the center square. And so what I want to do is I want to put the second row, I want to do it on the opposite to the outer squares, and the reason why is so that there's not too much fabric at these intersections here at these points. So that's why I did that. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and I am going to do the third row, and I will get right back with you. Okay, I've got my 3 pieces here, and I'm going to go ahead and sew the top to the middle and then both sections to the bottom. Okay, this is my finished block, and I am going to go ahead and get it and square that up. And mine is definitely off a bit, but I'm sure yours is so much better. So I'm going to go ahead and trim this up, and then that's it. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and I'll be working on the other 2 since I'll be gone for the summer, but I'll make sure that you have the information that you need. Thank you so much.